السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. ال- العرض دوت إن شاء الله هيكون بالإنجليزي وبالعربي. معظمه بالإنجليزي، هحاول أترجم العربي على قد ما أقدر. في حد على الخط ما بيتكلمش عربي؟ ما أظنش. أوكي. طيب. البرزنتيشن ديت الشركة اللي أنا فيها اسمها CloudSimple. أنا اسمي مصطفى خليل. أنا كنت شغال مع VMware لمدة حوالي 18 سنة. ونقلت من VMware رحت على CloudSimple علشان نبتدي السيرفيس الجديد ده اسمه CloudSimple. موجود عندنا عرض على Azure، وإن شاء الله هنبقى عندنا في سيرفيس موجودة على جوجل كلاود على آخر السنة أو أول السنة الجديدة إن شاء الله. السولوشن اسمها Azure VMware Solution أو جوجل كلاود VMware Solution by CloudSimple. الشركة جوجل الشركة اللي احنا فيها اللي هي CloudSimple عمرها حوالي 3 سنين. أنا ابتديت هنا من 2 سنين، وغرض الشركة إنها تعمل availability ل VMware Metal as a Service، يعني physical servers موجودة في cloud providers علشان العملاء بتاعهم يقدروا يبنوا VMware native solutions على الكلاود سيرفيس المعروضة بالcorresponding cloud provider هو Azure Cloud and Google Cloud and so on. This is kind of comparable to مقارنة ل VMware VMC on AWS اللي هو VMware Cloud على Amazon Web Services. العرض ده هيكون في معظمه على Azure Live Demo، وعندي في زي simulation لجوجل كلاود VMware Solution، لأن احنا لسه ما شحناش العرض ده. في أي أسئلة؟ Azure VMware Solutions زي ما كنت بقول لكم ده native VMware، معناها إن ما فيش هنا أي nested configuration. السيرفرز بتاعت VMware ESX بيبقى شغال على الفيزيكال سيرفرز اللي هي موجودة في الكلاود بروفايدر. يعني في الحالة دي I'm sorry, there's background noise. So there's no disruption. You can run and manage and secure your applications across VMware environments. يعني مثلا انت عندك اي في ابلكيشن مبنيه على Azure Cloud، ممكن تعمل انتجريشن ما بين الفيرتشوال ماشينز اللي هم شغالين في Azure Cloud مع VMware ESX and vSphere in general اللي هو شغال على الفيزيكال سيرفرز في البرايفت كلاود بتاعك. يعني انت احنا بتشتري من لما هوريكم انا اللي هو الخطوات اللي تبتدي انك ازاي تبني البرايفت كلاود على Azure VMware Solution او على جوجل كلاود VMware Solution. بس مقدما يعني هنا في الفيتشرز اللي هي موجوده، كل الفيتشرز اللي موجوده عن طريق ال VMware vSphere 6.7 update 2 بنعمل ايه؟ we manage, we install, we configure, we monitor and maintain on the back end, and all you need to do is just utilize the workloads. الفيرتشوال ماشينز اللي شغاله على البرايفت كلاود ممكن تشغلها من vSphere client او ممكن تشغلها من الازure بورتال او جوجل كلاود بورتال. So لما تبص عليها من ناحيه Azure شكلها موجوده زي انها شغاله في Azure، بس هي اصلا شغاله على الvSphere كلاستر اللي هي موجوده على الفيزيكال سيرفرز. You can modernize your workloads. بدل ما انت عايز تبني data centers أو تغير السيرفر بتوعك إن هم عندك في الداتا centers. ممكن تعمل expansion into the cloud or build a new data center into the cloud and move your applications to this modernized workload. Azure provides their own services like Active Directory and Azure Artificial Intelligence and Analytics. You can integrate these services with vSphere clusters اللي هي على private cloud زي ما هوريكم إن شاء الله في الديمو. أي أسئلة؟ Cloud migration strategies. زي ما كنت بقول لكم ممكن أنتوا لو الداتا سنتر عندكم قديمة أو if you have like end of life for the hardware or the software, it's very costly to build new data centers with new servers, new storage, new networks, and so on. So there are multiple ways to migrate to the cloud. You can either rehost, which means that you redeploy the whole environment to the cloud as is without any changes. And the technology that provides that is infrastructure as a service and VMware, Azure VMware Solution or Google Cloud VMware Solution, which gives you Azure dedicated and Google Cloud dedicated resources. Refactor, you minimally alter or take better advantage of the cloud. This is platform as a service. You can take your applications and run it on a platform that doesn't require redesigning your applications. Or you can re-architect, which means that you're going to need to manually alter, decompose the application, and convert it to services. For example, you can have an application that you can convert into Kubernetes containers, where you can run it anywhere containers are supported. But that requires a lot of re-engineering and redevelopment. So there is extra cost built into the process. Or rebuild means that you start over from scratch. New code written with cloud native approach means that you're going to have to rebuild everything specifically for the cloud solution that you're going to work on. And these are all under platform as a service or serverless microservices type of solutions. So you can see the extra cost that can be inherent to using the re-architecture or rebuilding or actually refactoring. So the easiest way is that you can move your workloads unmodified from your data centers to the private cloud, which is the least costly approach on short run. And on the long run, you end up getting your return on investment in a shorter period of time. Azure VMware Solutions, you can run your workload natively on Azure, as I mentioned. You can scale, automate, and use fast provisioning for your VMware workloads on a global Azure infrastructure or on Google Cloud infrastructure. You keep using your existing VMware investment skills and tools. So you already have vSphere administrators that are trained and are experienced in the environment. You don't have to retrain them on anything because it's the same exact user interface that they use on-prem. It's the same interface they use in the private cloud. But at the same time, because you expose your private cloud to the native solutions available by the cloud provider, for example, Azure VMware Solution or Google Cloud VMware Solution, you can integrate those seamlessly with the workload that's running on vSphere in your private cloud. And in the case of Azure VMware Solution, there is pricing and benefits for Windows servers and SQL servers. For example, if you're going to run Windows servers and SQL servers in Azure VMware Solution, there is a lot less costly pricing for the licenses that you run within to license these virtual machines compared to license them and on your on-prem or other cloud providers. The Azure VMware Solution is offered as a Microsoft first party. معناها ايه؟ Microsoft بتبيع Azure VMware Solution على Azure Service. انت تدفع لهم اللايسنس. Microsoft provides support and CloudSimple provides second level support. So it's a one-stop shop. You go to Microsoft for everything, and Microsoft owns the support and the account and the billing and so on. And when there's a need for technical support, Microsoft provides level 1 support, and they escalate to CloudSimple for level 2 and level 3 support. لو في أي مشاكل موجودة ل VMware itself, CloudSimple owns support for that. يعني أنت مش محتاج تبقى عندك أي account مع VMware. أنت تيجي لمايكروسوفت. Microsoft escalates to CloudSimple, and CloudSimple deals with VMware on the back end to resolve the issue. And you don't have to keep going back and forth between Microsoft VMware and CloudSimple. We own everything and we manage from beginning to end to resolution. The set of capabilities, these are well differentiated. You have Azure Network Native Services. I'm not sure, how many of you are familiar with Azure? Anyone on the call is not familiar with Azure?
Yeah, we are familiar.
Okay. So Azure provides service endpoints, and Azure has AAD, which is Azure Active Directory, and VMware has in vCenter Server SSO. So we integrate. You can use Azure Active Directory as your additional authentication source, same way as you do with your on-prem. For example, عندك أنت Active Directory in your data center, and you configure vSphere SSO to use AD as a identity source. You can do the same thing with Azure Active Directory or with your on-prem as well, either way. As I mentioned earlier, there's lower cost for Windows and server SQL servers because Microsoft provides discounts for both Windows and Linux. The difference is if you have using Azure, you can deploy operating system using the existing templates that are available in the marketplace. With our solution, the only difference is that you need to provide your template in vSphere to make it available to deploy from these templates. I will show you that in a demo. vSphere network, full compatibility. Our solution includes NSXT 2.4.1, 2.4.2 as well. And we upgrade them as VMware makes them available. So you can have configuration with or without NSXT, but the NSXT is available if you need to use it. vSphere cluster فيها distributed virtual switch pre-configured, and we allow you to add your port groups on this distributed switch. Or you can configure NSXT as an overlay network, and from there you can configure whatever you want within that overlay. You can set up your own edge gateways, you can set up your firewalls, you can set up your routers, and so on. That would be for east-west network connectivity between your on-prem and the private cloud or any other private clouds. CloudSimple has that unique approach in أنت في مثلا لو تروح على a cloud provider, for example, VMware and AWS, there are some situations in عايز to install application or solution that requires higher level of administrator privilege. We have an option in the portal to allow you to elevate your privileges from the default one, which we call a cloud owner, to a full administrator privilege for a duration of time until you finish installing and configuring your application or your solution. This is all done automatically via the portal. A unified management, you have a single pane of glass to manage vSphere and Azure native VMs. As I will show you, you go to the Azure portal, you can see all of your virtual machines من Azure أو من private cloud running on top of vSphere. أي أسئلة؟ And as I mentioned earlier, it's a single point of contact for Microsoft support. You go to the Azure portal, you go to your service. If you need help, you just click on submit support ticket. From the service, it automatically goes to the right queue, and level 1 support team handles it, and they have a set of topics that they can handle. Otherwise, they just escalate to us. As I mentioned, also, if VMware support is required, we take care of that. Available SKUs الهاردوير اللي موجود في 3 أنواع. in the US عندنا CS28 and CS36, and in West Europe we have CS36M. الرقم اللي في الاسم ده هو عدد الكورز الفيزيكال كورز. CS28 في 28 cores مع hyper threading you have 56 threads. CS36 في 36 cores, and CS36M also the 36 cores. Amount of RAM على CS28 في عندك 256 gigabytes of RAM. CS36 you get 512 gigs, and CS36M you get more, which is 576 gigs. Storage. The storage used by the private cloud is vSAN, which is all-flash storage. The caching tier on the CS28, you get 1.6 terabyte of NVMe cache tier devices, and you get 6 capacity tier disks at 96 gigs each. These are SSDs. CS36 and the 2 times 1.6 terabytes, so you get twice as many cache, and you get 6 1.9 terabyte of capacity, so you get double the capacity as well. على CS36M, same amount of cache, but you get 2 extra capacity disks, and like 8 capacity disks. Network, كل server فيه 4 Mellanox ConnectX and 4 LX dual port 25 gig ports. That one is the same across the board. The default vSAN policy settings, I'm not sure you're familiar with vSAN. I'm planning to have another session later on, probably later this month or next month, about vSAN as a cloud storage. But generally, vSAN provides the data management in the form of objects, and these objects are divided into components. The default policy for vSAN is RAID 1 or FTT1, which is mirroring, where you have for each object would have 2 replicas and 1 witness. If you have 3 or 4 nodes, if you have 5 to 16 nodes, we add an extra FTT, which means that you have an extra point of protection, where you get total 3 replicas instead of 2 replicas. So it's FTT value minus n plus 1. FTT1 is equals 2 replicas. FTT2 equals 3 replicas. But also in addition, لو عندك 4 nodes ممكن تعمل a custom policy اللي هو the RAID 5, which is FTT1 with striping as a RAID 5. And you can do, with 6 nodes or more, you can do RAID 6, which is you have FTT2 with RAID striping. The striping, we use erasure coding, which is similar to what is used with the typical physical RAID 5 and RAID 6 configurations. أي أسئلة على الهاردوير؟ Let me see if there's any chats.
Only one question regarding the object striping.
Yeah.
Or object mirroring. Now it depends on the object block size. I don't know. Is the object might be 50 gig or 10 gig, for example, or it might be 8K. So
Right.
how the swapping is happening between the two different sizes of the object.
Okay. Okay, good question. So in vSAN, the maximum component size is 255 gigs. So if you have an object that is 255 or smaller, then the configuration is based on the actual policy. So if you have FTT1, you only have 2 replicas and you have a third component for the witness. If you have an object that's larger than 255, then it starts striping for capacity into a number of components of equal sizes. So for example, you have a 256 gig object is going to create 2 times 128 gig components, and that's just for capacity. And then each of those components would be mirrored to meet the requirement. So for example, the top level on vSAN, you would mirror for the policy. And then the lower level, you end up with a RAID 0 stripes for the capacity. So you end up with 8, you end up with 4 components plus a witness. And each 2 of the components make up one component of the RAID 1. And the smaller component, the children components, are just the stripes for RAID 0 for capacity. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And how big is the witness configuration?
The witness is a very small one, and in some situation it doesn't even exist. vSAN replaces the witness in some situation with just a metadata property called n votes, the number of votes. The idea is that for vSAN, you always have to have a majority for in case of a network partitioning or a host failing or a disk component failing. And the partition that would have the higher number of votes, that's the one that would be for read-write. And the partition have the low number of votes doesn't allow any writes to it. So this actual witness size itself is very small and is very negligible, in like a few kilobytes.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. That's, by the way, that's why, for example, if you set up a vSAN stretch cluster, this is a topic I will cover in the next session, inshallah, you end up using a witness appliance, just a witness node that's a virtual machine that's running an instant ESXi host. You always run somewhere else outside of the 2 sites that you're stretching for a stretch cluster. And that nested instance, which is the witness node, doesn't use that much capacity. Any other questions? Okay. So what's the responsibility model? Who's responsible for what in this environment? The physical infrastructure, it's all Microsoft responsibility or Google. The physical security is all Microsoft or Google responsibility. Because these are all physical nodes that are hosted in the physical data centers of Azure Cloud or Google Cloud. Azure AVS portal or Google Cloud portal, this is our responsibility of Azure or Microsoft or Google. Hardware failures, the same way, because these are physically owned and placed in their data centers. ESXi host, the same way. And host patching, CloudSimple handles that through Microsoft or through Google. We have our own set of processes and automation to handle the patching. And when we do any patching, we make sure that your capacity is not impacted. So if we're going to take a host, put a host in maintenance mode, we would add another host temporarily as a maintenance host while the host being maintained is offline. So at any time while we're doing maintenance, your capacity still remains the same. And then after the host is patched, we bring it back into the cluster and then take another host, and put it in maintenance mode and do maintenance and so on. So we do a rotating outage, but we make sure that we add this extra resource to make sure that the total number of nodes you have remain the same while the host being maintained is in maintenance mode. For NSXT and NSX, Microsoft and Google, which is CloudSimple actually, on their behalf, handles these operations. But as far as configuration, it's your own configuration. You get the access to the NSX admin with the full admin rights, and you do all of your configuration within NSXT. Identity management, the deployment and lifecycle is handled by CloudSimple via Google and Azure. And the configuration, that's your own. Like I mentioned earlier, ممكن يكون عندك Active Directory on-prem أو ممكن يكون عندك Azure Active Directory. You can integrate your vCenter Server SSO with AD using AD as an identity source. That's your own configuration. To do that, you can configure this as an administrator or as a cloud owner. vCenter, the same way. Deployment and lifecycle is maintained by CloudSimple. Configuration for workloads is maintained by you. Configuration for the infrastructure is owned and maintained by CloudSimple. vSAN, the same way. We have the deployment and lifecycle is maintained by CloudSimple. And configuration, the infrastructure is maintained by us, and you can do the configuration for vSAN policies. That's all you have control over. And your responsibility is to maintain 25% of available capacity. By default, VMware has two thresholds. There's something called a soft threshold, which is a warning when you reach 80% of utilization. And then you have a hard threshold or an error, which is when you reach 90% utilization. We go a little extra and set an alert that when you reach 75% utilization, you get alerted to make sure that you clear some capacity, because you're required to maintain at least 25% free capacity on the vSAN storage to adhere to the SLA guidelines. ليه؟ لو انت عندك 3 nodes and you're using more than 75% of capacity, and a disk fails or a server fails, it's possible that the remaining servers, until we take care of the issue, may not have sufficient capacity to handle the missing components, which means that you're going to continue to run with a degraded state. ناقص component من ال3 components, for example. لأن مفيش مكان على الكاباسيتي ديسك إنها تعمل replication للmissing component. Until we replace the affected components, like the disk or server that fails. Guest OS is all your responsibility from beginning to end on the deployment, lifecycle, and configuration. CloudSimple, Microsoft, and Google are not responsible for any of that content. And if you need to make sure that you have your own backup. If any corruption happens within the guest operating system outside of the infrastructure, you're responsible to maintain a valid backup to restore from. Applications, same way. And the virtual machines and your workload, the same way. So any questions on this? Okay. Connectivity options. Microsoft Azure has options to connect using Express Route, which is a dedicated connection from your on-prem to their data centers using Express Route circuits. or you can connect from the Azure virtual network, Azure VNet, to the express route on your prem or on your private cloud. The same thing would be available via Google, ISMO VPC, Virtual Private Cloud Network. You can also set up a VPN appliances in the private cloud that gives you connection to either site to site, which means that you have your on-prem VPN gateway that you configure with tunnels to connect to your private cloud via VPN appliances deployed in the private cloud. There can be one or two appliances, depends on the configuration you want. And when you use two appliances to be running in HA pair for availability. Or you can set up point-to-site VPN, where you configure a VPN appliance on the private cloud, and per user, each user get their own VPN connection configuration bundle that they can plug into a VPN client that's based on OpenVPN. That allows you to connect from your desktop or from wherever you are to the private cloud directly, but anywhere else in the company will not have access to it. So, and لو انت عايز كل السايت بتاعك كل on prem يبقى ليه access لل private cloud, you can set up the site-to-site VPN, or you can set up the express route. If you're going to be only using it just for yourself, you can use a point-to-site. If you configure Azure VNet connection from a certain subnet in Azure to your private cloud, then any virtual machine running in this subnet on Azure would have connection to the private cloud without VPN. I will show you those examples in the demo. Any questions? Okay, so let's look at this, the components of, yeah, is there a question?
I have one.
أيوه.
Yeah.
معلش حصل عندي ديلي بس قبل البيكتشر اللي هي بتاعت الكونكشن
أيوه.
اللي هي فيها لا اللي قبليها بالظبط كده.
أيوه.
على قد معلوماتي تمام، اني انا لما باخد في ام من مايكروسوفت وحصل وبعمل ليها مثلا availability على زون ثانيه وحصل فيلير في الزون دي، فبلاقي الفي ام على الزون الثانيه في نفس الريجن. هل لو انا خدت السوليوشن بتاع في ام وير وحصل فيلير في الزون نفسها، هل هلاقي السوليوشن بتاعي في زون ثانيه في نفس الريجن؟
I don't know the answer to that, but if I care to guess, when you deploy your servers بتاعك على private cloud, you pick the region and availability zones. So on our end, لما بنعمل deployment لل ES6 servers, عندنا concept اسمه rack awareness. كل server ليه association مع الفيزيكال راك اللي هو موجود فيه.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So within the same availability zone, we have rack failure protection.
Yeah.
Because each server is sitting on the rack, has its own top of rack switches, which are the leaf objects, and they're connected to a spine with redundant connections. So we'll protect against single point of failure within the zone.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, if no other questions, move on. Okay. So on the left-hand side, you have your on-prem, which is you have your typical stack of vSphere, عندك vCenter on the top. نبتدي من تحت لفوق. من تحت عندك storage ونتورك the ESXi host connected to both the storage and the network, if that's external storage. On top of ESXi host, عندك فيه اللي هو virtual machines. بعد كده one of the virtual machines is vCenter, and vCenter manages the whole environment. You connect your environment to the private cloud. In case of Azure, you would use ExpressRoute. In case of Google, you use VPC. If you want to have a dedicated connection, that's high speed. And then on Azure, the layers that are in green, these are the standard vSphere stack. The layers that are in gray, these are managed by CloudSimple. And then the layers in blue, these are managed by Azure. So Azure provides the bare metal servers, physical servers in the data centers, as I was explaining. We have them on separate racks within the region. And then on top of these servers, we install vSphere. And as I mentioned, at the top of the rack switch, the leaf objects, and you have spine objects that provide the network. And we have the storage just in vSAN only, which is in each ESXi host. The Azure native services like AD, you can also use Azure storage like ANF and so on, or Azure Blob storage, security, and platform as a service. These are available native services on Azure. There are similar services on Google Cloud as well. Any third-party services, this responsibility of the third party. It's going to be something that either runs on Azure, runs in the private cloud. Azure Management runs on top of the Azure portal, and we have like a hook into Azure Management using Azure APIs, where we can this is how we integrate our services with Azure and expose the management parts of the private cloud from within Azure. Any questions on this? Okay. The logical diagram, to connect from your private cloud to your on-prem, ممكن أنت تعمل a migration للworkload on your private cloud to your, on your on-prem to your private cloud using VMware HCX, which is hybrid cloud migration. HCX, we provide this as part of the service, but in the current release, you need to request it and we deploy it on demand. In a future release, it's going to be available via the portal that you can deploy on demand without assistance from CloudSimple. And the actual solution, CloudSimple is a member of the VMware Metal as a Service program. And we are cloud verified by VMware. All what we deploy is what VMware have given to us specifically for use for this type of offering. And it's fully supported by VMware to us, and we are the one that can handle the support. So you don't need to contact VMware for any issues related to that environment. We're responsible for that. And the VMware components, as I mentioned earlier, on the whole stack, ESX, vSAN, NSX, which is actually NSXT, the whole vSphere suite. We used to include in the past VROps, but that's no longer available. In the early access program, we had that, but VMware changed the bundle. So VROps, you can deploy a VROps on your on-prem, and you can configure the vCenter server as an endpoint. So you can use your VROps automation as a destination for your deployment. For VROps, you can do the same thing, where you can have your own VROps on-prem, and then you can install the plugins, management plugins in the environment. For monitoring, we allow you to forward the log streams from ESXi and from vCenter to any syslog server that you have access to. but you need to request from us to do that, and we can configure it for you. Azure services, we provide Azure ARM integration, so Azure Resource Management, where you utilize this Azure services seamlessly within the private cloud, and we handle the interface between the Azure and the vSphere environment. Forgot to mention that all of these services, the billing and support, compliance, security, monitoring, logging, upgrades and patching, maintenance, and solution deployment, these are all handled by Microsoft and by CloudSimple. The billing and support is by Microsoft, and they escalate to us for support. Compliance and security is handled by Microsoft. Monitoring and login is handled by CloudSimple and Microsoft. Upgrades and patching and maintenance is handled for the physical hardware by CloudSimple with assistance from Microsoft. So we have boots on the ground. If we need anyone to go into a data center to replace a physical hardware component or replace a cable and so on, we have the ability to dispatch people on short notice. Solution deployment. We deploy solutions that are specific to the bundle, and you deploy your own. So common use cases, as I mentioned earlier, you can do data center footprint expansion, reduction or retirement. لو السيرفرز عندك قديمة أو بدل ما تشتري سيرفرز جديدة ممكن تعمل مايجريشن للورك من on-prem to the private cloud. or data center عندك عايز تصغرها لأن في cost تكلفة الكهرباء زادت أو التكييف أو administration ممكن تقلل عدد السيرفرز عندك وتعمل migration ل private cloud. أو تعمل retirement altogether يعني تعمل full migration to private cloud and retire your on-prem. Or you can do it as a disaster recovery. So you can use your DR site on a private cloud, and your production site is your on-prem or wherever it is. Same as for business continuity, you can have the workload available on both where something is unavailable, application level on the on-prem, it kicks in to work on the private cloud. Or you can use it for application modernization. If you want to migrate your application to some other environment that runs on the cloud, you can use the private cloud as a transition. You can use enterprise applications like the database SQL or Microsoft SQL or Oracle. Or you can use VDI and AUC enterprise application. None of those are out of the box. These are configurations that you need to design and deploy. We have customers that have large number of Oracle rack servers, and we provide specific documentations on how to configure that, and we assist you with the backend configuration. Same as for Microsoft SQL. For VDI, we don't have a VDI as a service yet. Microsoft has a solution on Azure, but this is not running on physical servers. If you want to have your own dedicated VDI, you can bring your own license of VDI, like VMware Horizon, and deploy it on your set of servers that you acquire from the private cloud. Any questions on this?
يا استاذ مصطفى
ايوه
هو الاي يو سي ده اختصار لايه بالظبط؟
end user computing.
end user تمام المستخدم النهائي يعني الكمبيوتر.
الاسم القديم للVDI end user computing معناها you can have virtual desktops for end users.
تمام.
It's the old name. AUC was the old name for virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI.
تمام.
Okay.
Okay.
These are two examples of two large customers that gave us testimonial. Dot Foods is the large US food company. It's actually the nation's largest redistributor. And the other one is a Gap. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Gap store. It's like clothing stores. This one is one of our large early adopters, and they're actually one of our early Oracle Rack cluster customers as well. So I will send this set of slides after the presentation, and will include some of those links with a set of links to sets of documents. So let me switch to a demo unless you have any questions.
استاذن حضرتك في حاجه بس معلش.
ايوه.
هو انا بس جيت في السيشن متاخر شويه، فممكن
أيوة.
حضرتك تعمل ريفيو كده سريع عن اللي فات بشكل ملخص كده سريع.
هعمله في الديمو.
اوكي ماشي.
Okay. So for Azure, you're familiar with Azure portal. You log into Azure and you log into your specific directory service. So I'm logged in here as my name in our default directory. And this is my home page. So when it's a fresh, you haven't installed CloudSimple service yet, the first thing you do is that you need to go here. This is the new version of the portal. So on the left-hand side here, you need to go to Services, and then search for CloudSimple. You get 3 services available. So for easier reference in the future, just hover over each service and click on the star to add it to your favorites. And from that point on, if I go home, and click here, you see them in the bottom here. Here's the CloudSimple service. When you click on CloudSimple service, if this is fresh configuration, you wouldn't have anything here. So what you do is that you click on Add. And this is how you configure CloudSimple service on Azure. You pick your subscription, your Azure subscription, and then you need to create a resource group, an Azure resource group, or if you have an existing one that you have pre-created or configured for this solution, you can select from an existing one. So let's say I'm going to create a new one. Let's say call it demo VMUG. So I created the service and it says new, and then you give a name for the not service, the resource group. You create a name for this service. This is the name that will be displayed when you go to the CloudSimple services screen. And then you pick the location, which is the region. Currently, we only have East US, West US, and West Europe. We're planning to add additional regions, North Europe, in Southeast Asia, Australia, and Japan, and so on. And the release is managed by Microsoft, and they would announce it on their website. So let's say I'm going to put it in West US. Then you need to specify a gateway CIDR. This one is going to be used by the management of this private cloud, which means that when you connect to the vSphere client, the vSphere client will be configured, the vCenter server, to be running in this management network. So this CIDR is a /28 CIDR. It's required, and make sure that it does not overlap with any of your other networks, either on Azure or on-prem. So you put your CIDR here, so I'm going to say 10.10.0.0, and you don't need to specify the mask because it defaults to /28. And if you click on Next to review and create, it says here, validation required, it's missing. Let's see here. I need to then give it a name.
The name.
Didn't save it. Okay. So I'm going to put demo VMUG. And validation succeeded. If I click on create, we're going to proceed with the onboarding process. We have a lot of automation happens in the back end for preparing the environment for you using this gateway CIDR that you specified. So can we have the physical network prepared for you to deploy your environment? So I'm going to cancel this, and I will show you an actual deployed one. So this one here, if I edit this, if I click on this service, you will see that I have already deployed that with this CIDR 10.0.1.0/28. So the next step is you need to acquire or to request purchase nodes. A node is an ESXi server, physical server. So to purchase nodes, you need to click here on Add Nodes. But I don't have enough in my subscription right now. So if I'm going to do that, it's going to tell me that says CloudSimple service needs to, this is just a node to be created before creating a node. Okay, so I need to pick the resource group. I'm already in West US resource group. And then give it a name. That name and how prefixly in nodes. We're going to add numbers after the prefix. So let's call it demo node West US, for example. Then I pick my region, West US. And then the node type. See, right now I don't have available nodes because by default we give each customer a quota, a limit of number of nodes. If they need to increase the quota, they need to contact Microsoft Sales to increase the quota. And then you select the node type. I won't be able to do that because I didn't have quota. And then the location. This is where you would see the actual location based on the region and the AZ, availability zone. So this is the screen here. This is the field where you specify when you buy the nodes, you pick where you pick the node from. And so you select node count here will be 3. So any questions on how to configure the service or to purchase nodes? Okay. So now that you deployed the nodes, you purchased the nodes, now you need to create a private cloud. So you're going to create VMware Private Cloud. You notice here that it's prompting me for a login. It's switching from Azure portal to the CloudSimple portal, and we use SSO. So I'm going to use the same user that I logged into Azure, and it's going to pass through the authentication to the CloudSimple portal. And you go to that screen here where you specify the name of your private cloud. And that one doesn't have to match the name of the service or the name of the nodes and so on. And here's the location. I have East US Availability Zone 1 and Placement Group 2. And I'm going to pick these nodes and pick the number of nodes. But I don't have enough nodes because I already used them. And this is the node types in the US. As I mentioned earlier, CS28 is 28 nodes, 28 cores, and CS36 is 36 cores. And for quick review, the CS28 has half the capacity of the CS36 of the storage. So with this one, you get more cores. You get 12 more cores, plus you get double the capacity for vSAN. And then advanced options, you get to configure your vSAN subnet CIDR range. and then you review and create. So I'm going to discard this because I don't have room. So here I have, this is the private cloud that I had created earlier. This one I have 4 nodes, total RAM across all 4 nodes, 1024. And total capacity I have for the cores, I have 112 cores. And total storage, I have 22.5 terabyte raw for capacity, and for the cache, 6.4 terabyte. And it's an all-flash configuration. The cloud racks, my servers are distributed over cloud racks. I will show you where they are here. So click on cloud racks here. I will select 1 and cloud rack 2. On that one have 3 nodes, and this one have 1 node. The rack is not necessarily a physical rack. This is just a grouping of the resources. But physically, they are split between, each host is on a separate physical rack. And you here see the node type, I have CS28. And then once I configure the private cloud, and I'll do that, I'll configure. This is what I have already configured. If you want to create a VLAN, you click on Create VLAN, and we provide predefined VLAN IDs on the switch ports that the private cloud is connected to. And when you utilize each of these IDs, then it gets removed from the list, and the remaining IDs are still visible. And then you give it a name, and you provide a CIDR block prefix and a mask here for this VLAN. So an example, you're going to have a set of virtual machines running in a VLAN separate from another set of virtual machines that already have deployed. So you need to create a VLAN for these virtual machines here. Or you're going to configure ANF, which is Azure Network File System, like NFS in Azure. You're going to need to connect the private cloud to Azure using this subnet that allows you access to that ANF. So you're going to be configuring, as I'll show you later, Azure VNet connectivity to a private cloud, and utilize this subnet to deploy virtual machines that will have access to this Azure VNet, so as well as access to the appliances deployed there, including the ANF. So any questions on the VLAN? This is just defining it on a physical network, and then you will go into vSphere client and configure a port group within this VLAN with the VLAN ID, and any virtual machine connected to this port group will have access to this VLAN.
بعد اذنك يا دكتور انا عندي سؤال.
ايوه.
معلش هو خطوه بس انا ما رضيتش بس اعمل انتربشن لحضرتك. هيبقى خاص بالمانجمنت بالفي ام كيرنل بتاع المانجمنت والفي ام كيرنل بتاع الديزاين ولا ايه؟
The VLAN subnets here. You have a set of management.
No, what I mean when you try to deploy cluster to add nodes.
When I enable the service, you mean?
After enabling service, the step of adding nodes, you set the subnet of vSphere and vSAN.
This is adding the nodes.
Yes,
there's no network
next
here.
step. Next step.
Next step is the review. There is no network here.
I think I'm taking the gateway.
I think you're referring to the service when I add the service, right?
Yes.
The gateway CIDR. This is just a gateway that connects.
Not this one. Not this one. I know this is.
Okay.
After you add service, you open the dashboard of service, and you start to add the nodes.
When I create the private cloud, right? This one here?
I think maybe this one. Yes, this one. Yes, this one.
Right. This CIDR here.
Yes,
right?
this is
Okay.
yes. vSphere
Right.
and vSAN subnet. Okay.
Right.
This subnet is related to VM kernels for vSphere and
Yes.
vSAN.
Yes, this is where all the management ports on vSphere, on ESXi, and vSAN and vMotion would be running on.
So this subnet is the vMotion. All services will run in the same subnet, vMotion and management and vSAN.
Yes.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
You're welcome. But you can configure separate subnets if you want, but these are predefined by the deployment. And you specify that address here, because if you're going to connect your on-prem to the private cloud, your VPN or your express route will give you connection to this network.
Yes, because generally we isolate traffic in production. We isolate traffic, the management traffic, and the vSAN traffic as well.
Right, but this is a subnet. You can further subdivide it. So see here, this is /21.
Okay, as you told me, it can be customizable.
Correct. Yeah, this is just creating the subnet, not the VLANs.
Okay, that's good. Okay.
Right, and then I will show you later how to further subdivide this into smaller subnets for separate VLANs.
Okay, thank you.
Right? You're welcome. Okay, so now we created the service. You purchased the nodes, you created the private cloud, and you end up with this configuration when you log into home, where you have the home, resources, network activity, and accounts. Under resources, you have the list of your private clouds here under the private cloud tab. And this is the private cloud that was created. And within the private cloud, you have subnets, VLANs and subnets. This is where you can take this network, the /21, and you subdivide it into further subnets. Okay? So right now here, the management, by default, you have anything that's user created will be called user defined. Anything that's created by the deployment, we have a management type. So this one here, you have a type is vSAN, and this is the vMotion. You see here, these are on separate subnets. So this is /27.96, and this is .64/27. So you automatically subdivide them into separate subnets from within the larger subnet that you defined when you create the private cloud. Okay, so we have this one here, and then we have, so that's the vSAN, vMotion, and the NSX host transport. We create 4 separate subnets, one for the transport, one for edge uplink 1 and 2, and one for edge transport. And then for the system management, this one is the management port for the ESXi hosts, where vSAN server accesses the servers to manage them. You notice here, there is a firewall table attached to that subnet. You can customize that. I will show you how to do this. Okay, this is the vSphere management network. If you just click on that, you will see all of your nodes, ESXi nodes, the versions, and FQDN and the IP address. Then you have NSX manager, the IP address. You have DNS servers. So actually we deploy two DNS servers, this one here and this one here, and they're always .8 and .9 from the subnet, from the actual management network. And then the VCSA, this is the vCenter server, it's always on a .6. Let's go to network. So now that you created the private cloud, you need to connect to the private cloud gate a VPN gateway. But to do that, you need to define your VLANs and subnets. So for example here, all of those I showed you before, user defined, these are all your workload subnets that will be user defined. Okay, so you can do this in advance, or you can connect first, and then if you already have planned your network layout, you can do it here, connect. You need, as I mentioned, you can do the fastest way to connect with the least infrastructure changes is using a point-to-site VPN. So you click on VPN gateways, and you click on a new VPN gateway. And then here you select the type. You have site-to-site and point-to-site. So point-to-site will connect from desktop to the private cloud. You give it the name here. Let's call it VMUG VPN. And the location, I'm going to be in West US. And then I'm going to put a CIDR block here. So I need to make sure that I use a CIDR. This is for the VPN. It needs to be not overlapping with any other networks that you define. I'm going to say here 192.168.1.0. And then the mask, I'm going to use, say, /28, because I don't need that many nodes. But if you're going to have more than one user is going to be connecting, then it's better that you set up a larger subnet here. Okay. Now, if I click on next, now I get the list of users that are defined in my portal here. Where did I get these users? When you are in Azure, wait. Here and go to my service. You can go to access control, IAM, and you add your users to a given role. These are your Azure users. The Azure user that's created here, that's given a role of an owner or a contributor, would be allowed to access this service, which is the CloudSimple service. The email address would automatically be created here the first time they log in to the portal using SSO. You remember when I first logged in, it prompted me to pick my name. The name I picked is my user account that I logged into Azure as. It uses my email address to create the account here. So now, the VPN you're going to create, you can specify, yes?
لا يا فندم انا بقول لحضرتك صح تمام.
أيوه. So you assign specific users access get over that, or the user can come in and enable themselves on the gateway, as I will show you in a few seconds. So this time I'm going to pick a user, and then I'm going to go ahead and click on, let's say, you'll find my name. Okay. Next. Now here, I'm going to specify the VLANs and subnets that this VPN will have access to. That's what I was saying. You can either configure the VLANs in advance and pick them here, or you can configure them later and then assign them to the VPN. So let's say I want to give them access to VMware Prod. So this is the management network. By the way, on the top here, there's an option that you can automatically add the vMotion network. If you could turn this on, would allow you to enable these options and automatically selects all of them. It's better that you have better granularity of the choice of which ones to select. Okay, so this time I'm going to go to Prod West. Yes. No, that's the management transports. I need to go here to the system management. Okay. Then I'm going to review and create, but I'm not going to create it. It's going to take a few minutes to deploy that. So once you do this, what happens in the background is that we deploy a virtual appliance in your private cloud. That is the endpoint for that VPN. That's what actually the VPN server. And once you do that, we can go here, select, for example, this point-to-site VPN. If I edit this, you will see that all I have is just the subnet that I created in the CIDR. But if I select it, and then I will see here the map subnets. This is where you can add the mapping if you didn't do it during the creation. So I can create manage subnets, and you pick the subnets, the same screen that I was at when I created the VLAN, the VPN. And then I can scroll up and down and select whatever I want to have access to for this VLAN, for this VPN. Now, users, they can come in as self-service and say this user doesn't have access. You can click on here. It will turn on access. And what it will do is that it will communicate with the VPN to create the user account there on the VPN and creates the configuration bundle. And then the user would come in and click on download my VPN configuration. So I'm logged in here as my name. Okay, my VPN configuration. It creates this bundle. So let me put it here. And I'm going to create a folder, call it VPN. And save it. Show in folder. And let me move this folder over here. So use the file that I just downloaded. If I extract this file, you will see in the file there is the OpenVPN configurations. We provide two connection types. One is SSL, encrypted with on 443, port 443, and one on port that's a UDP with port 1194. You right-click on the file, and you select, let me see, I need to expand it first, then extract. I'm not sure why it's not extracting. Extract. Okay, it's prompting me for the folder. And here's the extracted files. I will right-click in here, and then I installed Viscosity, which is an OpenVPN client, or you can get the free OpenVPN client from any repository. So you right-click and select import with Viscosity or with OpenVPN. Once I click on that, now I open Viscosity client. Let me open it here. So here's the file that is just imported. If I double click on this or right click and select edit, you would see the configurations. So this is the 443 and so on. And authentication, the username is not listed here because what it does that is the bundle includes that security, the auth key, authentication key. So the user would log in using this auth key that's associated with his account on the VPN server. And right click on it, select connect, will give you the connection. I already have done that earlier and renamed it to the MOS US. So this gives you connection to from your desktop to the private cloud. So after you connect, next thing you need to do is you need to access your environment. So I'm going to go here to my private cloud. And launch vSphere client. You will see the all familiar vSphere HTML5 client here. I mean the landing page. Click on that. Want me to log in, but because I'm already logged in, it's not going to ask me for the login because I'm already logged in here. And here you are. This is the all familiar vSphere client in vCenter server, and here are all the resources that I have. I have 4 ESXi hosts. I have my data center, and underneath this, I have a vSAN cluster. So when I click on cluster and configure, you will see here that I have vSAN. And vSAN has dedupe and compression enabled by default. Encryption is not enabled because you need to deploy a KMS server to enable that. Performance services enabled. iSCSI target it's not in scope right now. This is if you want to configure vSAN virtual disks as iSCSI LANs, and there are advanced options. Disk management, you'll see here, I would have the set of disks in the vSAN cluster. Each host has 2 disk groups. And each the disk groups together combine to make up the data store, the vSAN data store. Fault domains, each host has its own fault domain by default, because each host has its own rack. And then here we have out of the box, all you get would be under the cluster, you would have workload resource pool. The rest of these were created by the user. The workload resource pool by default has all resources available to utilize for your workload. Now you'll see here something called Azure Mapped Resource Pool. This is something that I created. I mentioned earlier in the presentation that you can have a virtual machine running on vSphere, and you can manage it from Azure. So for example, this one here, Azure Mapped Resource Pool, has in it a VM called test3. Right now it's powered off. If I go here to my Azure portal, and then I go to CloudSimple Virtual Machine Service, I will see the VM name test3 here. So right now it's powered off. If I power it on from here, and I go to here, you see in the bottom here shows that the power on virtual machine, and that one now is powering on. can access it from here. I can power off from here. I need to refresh first. And go here to power off. It's powered off. I can edit the virtual machine from here or from vSphere client. So if I go into properties, right now let's say disks. If I want to add a disk, select disks and add a disk. And I'm going to give it, say, 8 gigs. And click on save. It's updating. So our APIs is communicating with vSphere to do this operation. If I go in here, you will see here there's, need to refresh. I see the second hard disk shows up here now. I selected 8K, should have been 8 gigs. I didn't specify the right. I'm going to edit this VM, edit settings. And let's fix the size. So the hard disk 2, and I'm going to switch this to 8 gigs. And I can go back here and refresh. Just go back here, size, and then disks. It's not refreshing. Looks like it's a refresh issue here. Now it refreshed, so it shows 8 gigs instead of 8 kilobytes. If I monitor it, if I go here to overview and I power on this VM, you'll be able to see the actual statistics here that's obtained from the actual virtual machine in the private cloud. If you have an issue, you can click on New Support Request. And then here you select the type is technical and your subscription and the service. You pick which service. In this case, you need to make sure it's VMware CloudSimple's Azure VMware Solution by CloudSimple. Then you put a ticket summary and the problem type and subtype. You pick it from here. And then you go to next. Because I don't have a support contract, it gives me the option here to select the plan. How do I submit it? But for you, because you're going to already have the service part of your subscription, you will have a support contract here. Then it will take you to the next step, which would be the review and create. Once you do that, the ticket is created on Azure support, and level 1 support from Azure will handle the ticket. If they need assistance from CloudSimple, then they escalate to my team, to level 2. And if it's an issue we find that's related to VMware, we in CloudSimple contact VMware directly and escalate the issue to them and work with them. And if needed, we can bring all third parties together, you, us, and VMware, to discuss the issue. You don't need to go VMware for support. We handle that. Let's see here. Okay, how did I get this virtual machine to be visible in Azure? If you go here to the portal, there is that option is called Azure Subscription Mapping. You see here that I have mapped these private cloud resource pools to this Azure resource group name. That's the default resource group that we use in Azure. It's called Discovered CloudSimple VMs. If you want to edit those, you click on Edit. Then here you have the list of all of your source pools in your private cloud. And these are the ones that are already mapped. So you pick the one that you want to map and click on the right arrow. We'll move it here. You want to unmap, you click on the left arrow, you move it back into the unmapped. It's that simple. And whichever you map here, the VMs located in these resource pools would be visible in the portal. So for example, I have mapped the workload and Azure mapped resource pools. I have go back here and I go to, this is the one VM in that Azure mapped resource pools. In my workload, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's see here. I have a set of VMs here. If I go here to the portal and I go to my service, and go to virtual machines, I have a set of VMs listed here. And here you will see that the resource group that's on Azure Okay, so what if I want to add a virtual machine? If I click on Add, which means I'm going to create a new VM. So it gives you this dialog. Waiting for it to refresh. Sorry, my network's a little slow. So I will pick my resource group. It's going to pick CS West resource group. And then give it a name. That's the name of the VM. So I'm going to call it test 4. And I pick the region. And then which private cloud in this region, because you already have one in this region, it defaulted to this VM, to this private cloud. And then here I have the resource pool that I'm going to deploy it in. So you see here I have Azure mapped resource pool, or I have workload. So let's leave it as Azure mapped resource pool. Then I have here a set of templates. How do I get those templates to be displayed here? Simply deploy a template or clone a VM to a template and place it into a mapped resource pool. It will be visible in here. Whatever template visible is in a given resource pool that's mapped to the Azure resource group, it will be visible here to choose from. So if I pick a VM, I'm sorry, pick a template, let's say CentOS 7. Let's do Windows. It's a little larger, but we'll see. And for Windows, you can customize the username and password because Windows has the template. You can do that here. If not, you would use the default username and password. And then you click on next. I think this one you have to use the name, demo 1, password, demo 1, confirm password, demo 1. A little lag here. Next, and then pick the size. So the number of cores, you can slide this to increase the number of cores or reduce it. And the amount of memory, slide it to right and left. And hardware virtualization, if you're going to run a nested vSphere client, I'm sorry, nested DSXi server, for example, you need to expose the virtualization of guest OS, but it's not what we're doing here. And then I'm going to go to next, pick my network. So this one here, this is the port group that I defined for virtual machines workloads. How do I configure that? You're familiar with using distributed port groups on the distributed virtual switch. So I will show you quickly how it's done. You go here to network. Then you find the distributed switch that we pre-created for you. Expand here.
بقول يا باشمهندس،
مهم.
هو
أيوه.
ازاي اعرف المينيمم ريكوايرد لكل تمبلت وانت بتعملها؟
ازاي مش فاهم ازاي اعمل ايه؟
يعني ازاي اعرف المينيمم ريكوايرد لكل تمبلت؟ يعني مثلا انا ممكن اعملها، يعني ممكن اكريت مثلا هارد ديسك بدل
Oh, I see. For the sizes, you're gonna do it you configure it in the port.
الكونفيجريشن بتاعت كل تمبلت، ده قصدي يعني.
You create the template in the configuration you want and deploy it, but as part of the creation here, it gives you the option to specify the sizes. The next step is going to specify the disk size. So for example, I'm going here to next. Here's the disk size. That's in the template. You can change it, increase it, but don't reduce it if you have Windows.
تمام.
Okay.
هو اوتوماتيك مظبوط على المينيمم ريكوايرد يعني.
Right. That size here is obtained from the template that you created, but you can customize it at the time of deployment.
تمام.
Okay.
اوكي.
But I wanted to show you the network. How did I get this network configured? So remember, we had preset VLAN IDs on the virtual network in the private cloud. So you need to create the VLAN here and use one of the VLAN IDs that you want to use for this network. So here, go to network. I showed this earlier. When you create the VLANs, sorry about the network speed here. So the VLANs and subnets. I have a network problem here. This is from my machine to the private cloud.
باشمهندس معلش لغاية ما البيج دي تلود سؤال بخصوص الهاردوير لو سوري بخصوص لو انا عايز اعمل باتشنج او ابجريدنج للاي 6 اي وعايز اريبوت هوستس.
You don't.
Sorry?
You don't. We take care of patching. You don't do that yourself.
Okay, it's handled by Azure, by Microsoft.
By CloudSimple for Azure. Yes, we handle this on our end.
Okay, thanks.
And what we do is that when we schedule maintenance, if you, let's say you have 4 hosts for nodes, we add a temporary node when we take one of the nodes, put it in maintenance mode, so you still have your 4 nodes available while we're maintaining the node. So we call this a maintenance node. We go through this process via automation scripts on our end, and after we're done with all the maintenance for all the run-in updates for each node in the cluster, we take out the maintenance node.
Okay, great.
So you would notice some alerts in your environment saying that host failed, but that's not really failed. That's because we're adding a node and removing a node. We will send you advance notice that we're going to schedule maintenance in such a window of time, and that your workload should not be impacted.
Great.
Okay. So
معلش سؤال آخر. Another question. In Azure free tier account, it's allowed to deploy CloudSimple like this?
What type of account in Azure? The free?
Free tier account for training purposes. It's allowed.
Free tier account. Yeah, you can, but you're going to need to purchase. You need to pay for the nodes.
Oh, okay. So
to create the service, you can create the service with no issues. But once you create the service, next step is to purchase nodes.
Node, yes. Okay.
Minimum 3 nodes, which are ESXi nodes. And then after you purchase the nodes, then you deploy the private cloud on these 3 nodes or more. And then after the private cloud is deployed, then you go through the process of the configuration of your workloads and so on, the network and so on. Once you create the service, you have access to your portal here, CloudSimple portal, even if you haven't purchased the nodes yet. It's just the portal that's empty. And then you can purchase the nodes from within the portal or from within Azure portal. Okay.
Okay.
All right. And then, so the sequence of events that you log into Azure portal, you create the service, CloudSimple service, and to do that, you need to search for it. And I showed that earlier. You search on all services and you search for CloudSimple, you get 3 services available. One is CloudSimple Service, the other one is CloudSimple Virtual Machines, the other one is CloudSimple Nodes. If you select CloudSimple Nodes, you can purchase nodes from there, or you can go to the portal, CloudSimple portal, and let me just close this and restart it. Looks like it's on. After you purchase the nodes, you create the private cloud. And when you create the private cloud, you can go in the private cloud and configure the additional resources I'll show you.
Okay.
Let me go here. It looks like I have a network issue here. So if I'm going to go to, I'm not going to go through the process because you get the idea of the different steps of selecting these virtual machine size with the CPU and compute network. I mean, sorry, the compute and the memory, then the network and disk, and the review and create. So let's say let's go ahead and deploy this. Review and create. And it's validating. Look at the failed information is not required, is not valid. So in the basics. So something got missed here. Okay, so the password is not matching.
هو الصوت اختفى، مش عارف الصوت راح فين. هو كده السيشن خلصت ولا ايه؟
تقريبا ديسكونكتد عشان عنده مشكلة في النتورك وممكن يكون بيحاول ريكونكت تاني.
تمام. بقول يا جماعه لغايه ما السايت يرجع ممكن استفسر استفسار؟
اسأل واللي يعرف يجاوب هيرد عليك.
ماشي. الفي سنتر الفي سنتر 5.6 تمام. انا عارف ان دي حاجه ان يعتبر قديم دلوقتي في 6.7.
مفيش حاجه اسمها 5.6.
في 5.5 بس
5.5 6.5 6.7
تمام. 5.5 او 6 تمام. بس انا بتكلم على 5.5 تمام. كان في شويه مشاكل فيه في الويب في اللوجن وفي الويب لوجن تمام. حضرتك معايا؟
اتفضل معاك 5.5 على ما باشمهندس ابراهيم ممكن يفيدنا، بس على ما يعني على ما اعتقد او على ما اذكر 5.5 ما فيهوش ويب اصلا. كنا بنشتغل عليه بالفي سفير كلاينت، وما كانش ابلاينس اصلا، كان ويندوز بيزد يعني. ممكن المهندس ابراهيم يصحح لو
انا متهيألي كان في
او اي حد
5.6 مش اخر حاجه، متهيألي كان فيها ويب بس كان في مشاكل.
6.5 اللي فيها ويب، و6 اوكي في ويب.
تمام.
ممكن يا
طيب
شباب حد يصحح لو موجود يعني.
طيب هو انا كنت عايز استفسر عن ايه، هل في سايت فيه اركايف للسوفت وير لل لل للسوفت وير بتاع الفي ام وير؟ عشان السايت نفسه ما بيجي عند بعض السوفت وير يقوم قايل لي مالكش صلاحيه انك تنزل السوفت وير في الحاجات القديمه. تمام. فهل في سايت
انا
فيه اركايف للقصه دي؟
مش فاهم بصراحة السؤال خالص يعني.
يعني مثلا في
بص يا محمد، بص هو على
اه
السايت بتاع فيم وير موجود كل الفيرجن، يعني تقريبا يمكن ممكن تلاقي
بس ما بيسمحش الواحد ينزل
ماشي.
الا
ما هو
حاجات
ده موضوع
معينه.
هو ده موضوع برميشن عندك، فانت الحل بقى ممكن تلاقي على مواقع تورنت حاجات قديمه بقى او حد رافعها يعني. انما ما
طيب
فيش سايت
هو
معين.
انا مثلا يعني لو يعني مثلا هل انا واخد شهاده من في ام وير ده هيديني بعد كده ميزه زي كده؟
اه بيبدا يفتح، يعني لما بيبقى الاكونت بتاعك شغال من فتره يبدا يفتح لك ان انت تقدر تعمل داونلود يعني.
عادي لو انا بيعتبرني ايفالويتور كده لو انا واخد شهاده منه.
مثلا
تمام. بس بتاكد عشان لو اتيحت لي حاجه زي كده اعرف أبقى في مرونه في التطبيق، ما يبقاش فيه مشكله يعني. انا عارف ان السايت هم عاملين سايت لابنج، بس السايت لابنج برضه فيه مشكله تانية، ان في اللابات القديمه اتشالت. يعني واحد لو جه يطبق على لاب قديم مثلا تشرح له
بص لا انت ما تطبقش اصلا على اي حاجه قديمه، يعني انت ما تذاكرش على حاجه اقل من 6.5. اقل من
تمام
كده ما تضيعش وقت.
تمام،
لان
عشان
انت
مبقاش ضيع وقت في القديم. ابص
لا
ابدا
ما
من.
تضيعش يعني بدايه، يعني اشتغل على 6.5 6.7
طيب
كده.
وانا الفكره بتاعت النهارده عجبتني، ان انا ممكن اطبق على السايت نفسه بتاع مايكروسوفت ازورو. تمام. ازوري، معلش ازوري. عشان اقدر اطبق عليه اعمل الهوم لابنج بتاعي. فهل ده يعني لغايه دلوقتي انا فاهم صح ولا في حد يصلح لي؟
لا بص مش هينفعك في القصه دي. بص هو الافضل، يعني ده من وجهه نظري يعني،
اه
الافضل تجيب سيرفر او ورك ستيشن كده يوزد وتطبق كل حاجه بايدك.
عشان يبقى الحاجه ديديكيتد فعليا وعلى الواقع بتاعها يعني مبقاش في
يعني
مشكله فيه.
بالظبط.
انا اقصد يعني لو الفكره واحده اطبق هنا وابقى
لا مش
عارف
الفكره
البيزك بتاعت
مختلفة.
الاثنين.
لا الموضوع يبقى مختلف. غير كده الموضوع ده لو هتعمل على اي حاجه على الكلاود هيبقى مكلف عليك.
لا
الموضوع
كلاود، لا كلاود انا عارف طبعا مكلف طبعا
ماشي، ما على اجور او غيره او كده، ما الموضوع ده مكلف. مش
يعني مش فور فري.
لا ما فيش
بس
حاجه
انا جيت في
فري.
السيشن متاخر شويه فما اعرفش الموضوع من
لا
اوله.
ما فيش اي حاجه فري طبعا يعني.
بيشرح مميزات بس الاجر، لكن هو لكن مش
هو
ما
ما
بي
بيتكلمش على الاجور، هو بيتكلم ان الكلاود سيمبل ده مبني يعتبر على الاجور، مبني على الجوجل كلاود كده، لكن طبعا كل حاجه بفلوس يعني.
طيب تمام. بيشرح بس الامتيازات بتاعتها فقط مش اكتر من كده يعني.
بالظبط.
تمام. بس هي مفيش شك انها التولز بتاعتهم حلوه يعني، بس المشكله ان هم لو عاملين بس حتى ولو زي في ام وير كده لابات او فكره ان واحد يطبق برضه عندهم كانت تبقى
عادي
ميزه
عادي،
حلوه.
الحاجات دي ممكن بيبقى بيديك ديمو فتره كده ان انت تتست يعني، لو انت على قد المذاكره يعني.
بس مش بسال اكتر من كده، مذاكره بس.
هو الباشمهندس مصطفى دخل معانا تاني اهو.
ايوه. معلش انا عندي مشكله. انا رجعت تاني على التليفون، الكمبيوتر عندي في مشكله.
تمام.
سامعني؟
معاك يا باشمهندس، اتفضل سامعين.
طب خليكم معايا، انا احاول انا.
اتفضل معاك.
مهندس ابراهيم، بس بخصوص ان الفي سنتر ابلاينس بيبدا من فيرجن 5.1 يعني.
الابلاينس موجود من 5.1. الابلاينس موجود من 5.1، لكن طبعا ايه كان اصدار محدود قوي يعني.
بس 5.5 كان شغال، وكانت الامور بالنسبه لنا فيه نوت ايشو بيس اوف كيك يعني. هو بس ايه يعني، اي ثينك ان افضل اصدار ظهر في الموضوع ده كان ستارت من الفيرجن 6، بس 5.5 كان كويس. 5.1 هو اللي كان لسه بس عشان ستارت اب.
كان اول مره كان حتى كان لسه طبعا هو يعتبر يعني لانه هو بداية يعني تقدر تقول 5.1 لا الفي سنتر فور ويندوز سيرفر كان افضل. 5.5 الى حد ما قرب شويه بدايه من فيرجن 6 الاثنين بقوا متساويين في
كلام
الفيتشر،
سليم.
لان كان في فيتشر في الابلاينس ما كانتش بتبقى موجوده في الابلاينس، كان على ويندوز سيرفر بس زي الابديت مانجر وكده.
تمام.
هو مش في حاجه اسمها في سنتر مانجر؟
لا الفي سنتر لا مفيش حاجه، هو الفي سنتر سيرفر نفسه هو ده اللي شغال،
تمام.
مفيش حاجه اسمها في سنتر مانجر.
تعبانكم معانا يا جماعه، ربنا يجازيكم خير ويوزعوا في نظام حساباتكم يعني. المجهود اللي انتوا عاملينه يعني مجهود كويس يعني، فبقى انا ب... ب... فانتوا مشكورين يعني على المجهود اللي انتوا بتعملوه في السيشن دي يعني.
ربنا يجزاك كل
الله
خير.
يخليك.
الو سامعني؟
ايوه
ايوه
سامعك يا
الصوت
سامعك يا
واضح،
باشمهندس
اتفضل.
مصطفى.
ايوه، احاول ارد علي اسئله لحد ما الكمبيوتر يرجع. الكمبيوتر لسه مش شغال. في اي اسئله اقدر ارد عليها دلوقتي؟
لا يا فندم، الديمو اللي حضرتك شرحته ده النسخه اللي هي مش الاكونت مش الديمو صح؟
الاكونت ده لايف اكونت. انا عندي اكونت بس ماليش فيه سبورت كونتراكت.
تمام. يعني اقصد لاي اكونت ديمو يقدر يعمل نفس الحاجات اللي حضرتك شرحتها النهارده، مش كده؟
لا، انت علشان تعمل برايفت كلاود لازم تشتري نودز.
يعني نو واي، ما فيش حل غير كده.
لا، ما فيش حل غير كده.
تمام.
لو انت عندك لو انت بارتنر مع مايكروسوفت ممكن يدوا لك اجر كريدتس علشان تجيب environment بيسموه زي proof of concept. بس لازم تتعامل مع مايكروسوفت سيلز عشان تشوفوا ما يقدروا يعملوا لك environment تبع اللي هو الايفالويشن ولا لا.
تمام.
دكتور مصطفى، البرايسز والكوست بتاعت الكلاستر لو انا هشتري 3 نودز for example يعني for 2 days or 3 days just for training, how much for?
Unfortunately, the minimum I think is per month.
Per month?
بيحسبوه بالساعة أظن 730 hours per month, but it's billed monthly and the increments is monthly. There's no lower than 1 month.
Okay, how much for 1 month?
I don't know, depends on the region. So if you go to the Azure portal, they should have the pricing there in the Azure billing. In the US, I think I don't remember. It's about. I don't want to quote something that I'm not clear on. I don't deal with sales. But the price should be published on Azure.
Okay, I will check here.
grab another computer. This one looks like it's dead. I'll be right back.
It's $4,700 per month. CS28.
Sorry, it's just back. I got back. How much did you see?
Per month, $4,700.
That's for the CS28?
CS28, yes, per month.
Yeah. So I got another computer. I'm booting now. Let me see if I can pause the recording meanwhile. Okay, recording resumed now. طيب احنا كنا بنعمل deployment للفيرتشوال ماشين، فخليني ارجع تاني من البداية هنا. انا هروح على service CloudSimple service and open the service and go to the portal. So I'm going to need to install the VPN client here. So let me find open VPN. Okay, now I need to go back to my portal and download go to network and then VPN gateways. And and open point to site. And I'm going to download my VPN configuration. Let me extract this. Let me copy this first here. And start VPN with this. So let's see if it connects it now. So I'll go here to portal and resources and my private cloud. And launch vSphere client. Okay, it's not connected. Let's see here. Open VPN GUI. Okay. Connect. Try another one.
ده هنا ممكن تقفل البرنامج وتفتحه تاني، جاي ازاي يساعد في المشكله؟
ايوه المشكله ما عنديش انا اللايسنس بتاع اللي هو
الاوبن في بي ان.
لا اللي هو الفيسكاسيتي عشان ده كمبيوتر تاني.
تمام.
خلينا نشوف ايه المشكله هنا. Oh, okay. I need to copy the
license?
No, the key to the directory. So it needs to go to where the actual client is installed, the VPN client. One button here. Right click, more, the file location, and I think it goes to the user. Open VPN, config, and this one here. So I need to copy it to this directory. Okay, now I should be able to open it. There we go. Okay, connected. Now let's refresh here. There we go. So it's cloud owner, and we have a default password, which is CloudSimple 1, 2, 3 bang. Nope. Let's find it in the documentation. docs.microsoft.com/Azure/CloudSimple. There it is. And cloud owner. I think it's without, it's a lowercase s. Let's see. I need to put the full path. So it's cloud owner at cloudsimple.local. And there we go. Because the SSO domain is cloudsimple.local, I have to put the full username, even though it's the default domain. If you add an additional identity source, unless you set the identity source as the default directory, you have to specify the full username with the username at the SSO domain. Okay, so I wanted to show you the port group. So when you expand here in your inventory under network, you see that distributed switch that we have created out of the box. And underneath it, you have a list of port groups that you created. So when I was deploying the VM, I was selecting workload 1. How to create a port group as a cloud owner, you just right click on a distributed switch, select distributed port group, new port group, and then give it a name. And then you select the VLAN, type as VLAN, and here the VLAN number is the one that you get from the network here when you were creating the VLANs and subnets. And you create a VLAN subnet. The VLAN ID you get from here that you're going to configure for this subnet. So I was going to configure here this 192.168.1.0, and the CIDR is optional, so I'll leave it, would be the full CIDR. Let me see, subnet name, that's just the name, sorry, name optional. And CIDR 192.168.0.1 and /24, or I can make it smaller depending on how many clients are going to connect. You need to have enough host addresses for each connection that these users will connect to the VPN with. So if you're going to have 10 users, you need to make sure you have at least 12 addresses, because you're going to have the default gateway and the network address. So for the net mask here, let's say I'm going to select /28. That should give me, I think, 30 hosts, right? Invalid CIDR. I need to put .0, not that one. .0. And then submit. So it's going to create a VLAN with the VLAN ID, VLAN subnet name. I'm going to call this demo-vmug PG. So this is 2625. So as this gets created, I'm going to go here to my vSphere client. I'm going to put this one here, 26, was it 2621?
So it's 2625.
2625?
Yeah.
Okay. Demo. Need to refresh here. Come back here and here. Okay, 2625, you're right. Okay, so let's go back here and put here 2625. And next. So if this VLAN is going to communicate with a storage appliance on Azure, like ANF, for example, there's a limitation of the MTU size. So the appliance would not utilize anything higher than 1500 MTU size. So you can specify the MTU size in the configuration. let's see here, at the time that you're creating the port group. Sorry, at the time you're creating the, we'll do that on your behalf at the time we'll create the VMKNIC on the host that will be connecting to this VLAN. But for now, let's say this VLAN is going to be for virtual machines, that's for workload. So you have here workload 3, and that's the virtual network, the port group that we created for the workload. Now I'm going to go here and deploy. I don't know if we finished deploying the Windows VM or not. Put in Azure Map Resource, it didn't, okay. So let's go back here to my Azure portal, and I'm gonna go to the virtual machine service, CloudSimple virtual machine service. And I don't have the Windows VM here. I'm gonna create add. And I'm gonna pick the resource group. Demo in VMUG. And I pick my West US region. And I'm going to pick the appliance, the template. And I have one is Windows Server 2016. And the username, I'm going to call it demo1. Password is demo1. Demo1. Next. And here you specify the virtual machine size, number of cores, and amount of RAM. I'm going to pick the network here. So in this case here, I'm going to change the network here to be workload 3, the one I just created now shows up here. And next, I have my virtual disk size. Next, review and create, validation passed. Now I'm ready to create. So it shows here deployment is in progress. So we sent the API call to the vSphere, vCenter. And if I go back here, let's just get this out of the way. I see here is deploying the template. And it shows here in this mapped resource, resource pool. So did it finish deploying? Let's go back here. Close this. It's still deploying. I know that's Ubuntu. I think it finished and it's powered on automatically. Now, if I launch this web client, I mean the remote console, you see a window booting. That's the one I just deployed from Azure into the private cloud. So what you pick, because you started with the CloudSimple virtual machine service, it's utilizing our APIs that we integrated into Azure to communicate with vSphere for the private cloud that you selected and deploys it into the resource pool that you selected, and it puts it in the Azure resource group that you selected during the configuration. So it doesn't matter which resource group you put it in Azure, as long as it's accessible by the private cloud. And what you select in for the resource pool is where it gets deployed into the private cloud. And it booted with the default username and password that we created. So for you to get such a template to be available for selection, let's go here to, if I pick this one here, I'm going to create a template from it. So say clone to template. And here I need to give it a name. Let's see here, VMUG win template. And select the location of the template. Here, you know, this is just a folder. Then you need to pick the resource pool. So I'm going to say the template, I'm going to put it here in anywhere, it doesn't matter. I'm going to put it in workload VMs. This part here is the important part. You need to make sure that you pick the resource pool that is mapped to Azure. And remember, when I was showing you the resource pool mapping, I had both workloads and I had the Azure mapped resource pool mapped to Azure. So I picked this one here. And it's going to be stored on the vSAN data store. And finish. So here's deploying it. Okay, and you notice that it no longer shows here because it would show only when you go to the virtual machines view, and you would go to the folder that I picked it to go to. So I put it in workload VM, and here's the demo in VMUG. If I go here to Microsoft Azure portal, and I go to my virtual machine service and add an VM, same process I did before, just need to select which resource group. I'm going to put it in CS West US, and then name test 5 in VMUG, and the region, I pick my West US, and then here you would see the Windows Server that I added. Say this was the earlier one here. The new one that I added is this one here in the bottom. This one here the earlier one, let's see, is in Cohesity templates. And this one here is in the workload VMs. So as simple as that. So whatever you put in a mapped resource pool in vSphere cluster, it will show up here when you deploy a virtual machine, picking the template from any of these mapped resource pools. So any questions on this part? Because that part I wanted to make sure it's clear. Okay, right, so let's go back here, and in the network, there is the concept of a public IP. Azure allows you to obtain a public IP that would be a static IP or dynamic. For our API implementation, we pick a static IP. So if you want to deploy a virtual machine in your private cloud, and you want to make it accessible from the internet, say it's a web server or something like that, and you're going to deploy it in a VLAN that's configured as the DMZ, for example. You'll deploy the virtual machine in this VLAN on the private cloud, but you want to assign it a public IP address. To assign it an address, you need to go in here You need to know the virtual machine's private IP address. So you click here, new public IP, and call this web server, for example. And you pick the region. I want to put it in West US. The reason I have all these three is that's because my subscription has private clouds in each of these regions. So I want to make sure that I pick the right region where I want to deploy this. And then idle timeout in minutes. The default is sufficient. Then attach local address. So this is the address I want to give for, that's the private address for the virtual machine. So I'm going to say it's 192, let's say 10.10.0.25. And DNS name, this is optional. That's the name that would be the prefix, the suffix with westus.cloudapp.azure.com. If you're going to have that service running in a virtual machine accessible by an FQDN, you would configure your public DNS with the public IP address and an A record for that virtual machine so that you can provide access to it. If you can have multiple VMs sitting behind one public IP and you're going to do load balancing, then you can deploy a load balancer in Azure that would route the request to the backend VM that's running in the private clouds. So we have written some solution guides on how to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and click submit. It assigned the IP address. And I need to refresh here. Not sure why it's showing. It's not showing. Probably need to refresh here. I'm going to take this up with our engineering. Looks like it's a refresh issue. It's not showing here. So anyways, the VM that you would map a private address to a public address, you need to go to the firewall and allow inbound traffic to only the port for the application that runs in that VM via this public IP to prevent any other access except for, let's say it's a web server, you put it to port 80 and port 443, for example. And you would do that in the firewall by creating a firewall table or editing the existing one. So this firewall here, I need to change the resolution to see a little more. Hopefully you can read this font. So I can create a new rule. And in the rule here I have, let's call it to web server. And priority, that's the priority in the order of the rules in the firewall rule table. So I'm gonna say priority 10. And then this is going to be for public IP, must be equal or greater than 100. So I'm gonna put 105. And here, the direction is inbound, and the source is any, and the destination you need to pick the protocol and you specify the port range, and here if you're going to put it 443 to 443, mean that's going to go only to this port. And the public IP, that's the public IP that you have reserved in the previous step. So whatever IP address that's assigned to this VM, you specify this, and then you need to have source any to destination needs to be see, I'm in the right screen here. TCP source any port range any. Now in this case, I'm going to put the source port range. Yeah, that should be any. And I won't be able to proceed without putting in a public IP. So let me edit an existing one to show you the full rule. So this is a stateful inbound. I'm going to edit that one. So this is a public IP stateful, and it's inbound, and the action is allow. And TCP is the protocol, and the source any, the source port is any, and the destination, here's the public IP, and here is the destination port range. If you leave it any, means everything is open, but it's better that you tighten down the access to only the port for that given IP address. So that means that any traffic that hits the public IP, the firewall would allow it in, and then based on the port map, the IP address mapping for the public IP, will forward it to the corresponding private IP that we have defined in the public IP section. Any questions on this firewall rule for public IP? Okay. So let me see what else I want to show you here. Let me show you how the nodes look like. So you have the CloudSimple nodes. This is where you can add nodes to purchase. And this is where you specify where you're going to deploy it. I'm going to pick the resource group. I'm going to put it in CS West resource group. And then name prefix, I'm going to call it VMUG node. And we're going to add numbers to each node you add with the prefix. Then put in West US. And again, as I showed you earlier, I don't have enough quota to add the nodes. Otherwise, this would be grayed out. That's why it's grayed out. And the quota is based on your account. So by default, each account will get minimum, I think, 4 nodes or 3 nodes. And if you want it more, you can request from Microsoft sales team to allocate more quota. A quota allocation doesn't cost you money, but only when you start purchasing. When you select the create here, that's when you actually purchase in the node. And from the time you purchase the node, the billing timer starts. And the number of nodes here you select, and the location, this is where you select the region and the placement group. Region availability zone and placement group. So I wanted to show you quickly how the Azure, the Google Cloud Service looks like. So let me get the URL for that. Okay, open the window. Okay, so this is a simulation. If you're familiar with Google Marketplace, you would see something like this. So in the search field, you would search on VMware, which will give you an option there that says VMware Solution. You select that, and then you can click on Visit CloudSimple site to sign up. It will take you to a Google form where you fill your information for the early access sign up. And our product management and the sales team would work with you on evaluating the account and providing the access to the early access. And it shows you here that we're going to have one model, which is called CS1 standard 36, which is equivalent to the CS36 we have in Azure. You have 2 sockets with 36 cores total, and 512 gigs of RAM, and 11.25 terabytes of raw capacity, and 3.2 terabytes of cache for vSAN. So if we go here, I'm going to go through this process and put the name and information, and then you click submit. So after you add the service, you get access to the actual service interface. So let me see here how to do that. Go here to CloudSimple solution, and then log in to CloudSimple. And it says you're leaving Google because you're going to switch to the CloudSimple portal. And you're going to log in with the username, and it takes you to this CloudSimple portal. It kind of looks slightly different from the Azure portal, the Azure CloudSimple portal, which is that one here, because this one here provided the skin of the Azure to same experience as the customers using Azure portal. So let me close this here. Now in here, you would create a private cloud, and you get the option to select the number of nodes from your quota, and you specify your IP address CIDR for management network. You click review and create, and you click create. Now you have a set of private clouds. This is the one that I'm supposed to have created now. You click here, you get the details of this private cloud. It has similar interface of launch vSphere client, expand private cloud, edit VMware stack option, and delete the private cloud. In here, you'll see the configurations, those total 4 nodes and total storage capacity across all nodes, because each node had 11.25 terabyte for capacity, multiply this by 4. And you have the version. And I mentioned earlier that you have the option to elevate or escalate your privileges. This way you do it here. So I'll show you on Azure portal. So I'm going here to resources and my private cloud. And in the bottom here, click on escalate. This one here, you specify how long you want the escalation for. And you click, I understand that you need to be careful not to change any other system configurations, actions taken during escalated privileges. State can adversely impact your system, can cause your system to become unavailable. So do not touch anything that's related to vCenter server infrastructure configuration. Only the idea is that you'll get this privilege escalated to create a service account for the given application or solution you're going to deploy. And then you deploy the solution using the service account. And once the solution is deployed, you no longer need the elevated privileges. And the service account will be the one that will be using the custom privileges for the user account. Never log into the CloudSimple, the private cloud via the vSphere client or otherwise directly using an account that has administrative privileges that is not a service account. Sorry, that is a service account. Because we monitor these logins, and if we detect a cloud owner logging in with a service account as a user that has elevated privileges without escalation privileges, we disable this account and the application using it will no longer function. So you need to be careful not to do that. We will send you an alert that you have done this and we disable the account. Otherwise, you will let us know and we'll re-enable the account and you should not log in with it again. You only allow the application or the service to log into the environment via API using the service account. Once you click confirm, it's going to process the elevated privileges automatically in the back end. And when you log in with the cloud owner, you would have full administrative privileges. Any questions on escalated privileges? Okay. So here, if I'm going to launch the vSphere client, this is assuming that you already have configured the VPN. The VPN configuration is a similar concept as with Azure, but I don't have the full API here yet. So let me see if I go back. This thing is in the way. If I go here to network, and I have VPN gateway, and here's my point-to-site VPN, I can create the point-to-site VPN gateway here by selecting create a VPN gateway, and select a region, and select a type, and provide the gateway subnet, and gateway name, and the VPN client subnet. This is the subnet that the VPN client will get an IP address from. And then you click on next. Now you select which users you're going to authorize for this VPN. You pick the given user, and then you click next, and then you specify which VLANs you want to have this VPN access. Same workflow as you saw in Azure. And you review and submit. The site-to-site VPN is the same way, but when you click here, you just click site-to-site VPN. And you specify the region and you specify the gateway name. And if you want to have an HA pair of these site-to-site VPN gateway appliances deployed, you click on high availability, we could deploy 2 nodes, 2 virtual appliances in HA configuration. And it's not related to vSphere HA, this is HA of the application itself. You click on next, here you provide the connection name. This is the information that you need to know from to configure on your end. So this information enter here will be configuring the peer configuration they're going to put on your VPN gateway on the on-prem that will connect you to the private cloud. So you put the connection name and the peer identifier and the peer IP. And this pre-shared key that we pre-allocate for you, you need to copy that and use it in your VPN gateway on the on-prem as the PSK, the pre-shared key for this connection. And then it's going to automatically set up 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2 of the VPN tunnel. The on-prem prefixes, this is your on-prem network that you want to connect to the private cloud. You can click Add New here to specify additional on-prem prefixes. Then you click Next. Then you have the subnets you want to connect on the on-prem, sorry, on the PC, that you're going to connect your on-prem to this via the VPN, site-side VPN. Then you click Next, you review and submit. Account, you will see here the account information. This is the summary of your configuration. And here are the users that can be logged into the environment, to the portal, the CloudSimple portal. And again, these users are created by virtue of the email address of the user that's logged into the Google Cloud portal or the Azure portal at the time that they selected to access the CloudSimple portal. We utilize the user email address of that account that was logged into the Azure portal or the Google portal to create the corresponding account here. And what happens that the user gets an email address, an email message for them to respond to validate or activate the account. If they haven't responded, it will show as pending activation. Once they are activated, it will show as active. The same process works for either Azure or Google. VPC peering, this is equivalent to the Azure Express route. This is where you get the information of how to connect your on-prem to Google, to the Google network to connect you to a private cloud. And what we do here, we'll provide you a script that you actually copy from here and paste into your on-prem VPC. So you already have a VPC connection to Google. By configuring this in your VPC configuration, we'll add the connection to the private cloud VPC. It peers your Google VPC to the CloudSimple VPC. If you compare this to Azure, if you configured, you have 2 options, either from Azure VNet to the private cloud or from the on-prem express route to the private cloud express route. We have a documentation here. Let's see if we still have this document open. This thing doesn't get out of the way, I'm not sure why. So in here, I will let's see, where is it? Let's look here for express route. In here, it shows you a diagram that you have. This is your on-prem data center. This is the private cloud. If you're going to configure an express route global reach, we're going to pair our on-prem express route to your on-prem express route with the PC express route via a transit dedicated circuit here. And what you do is that you would you need to go to your express route configuration in Azure and generate an authorization key and send that to CloudSimple via a support ticket along with the URI for your express route. On our end, we set up the peering by claiming this authorization key and configure the connection to your express route. The other option is that you can have an Azure VNet connection to the private cloud. In this case, we will create an auth key for you that you would claim from Azure to configure your VNet subnet gateway and connection. And once you the subnet that where you configure this connection will be given access to your private cloud without restrictions. You may need to go into the firewall and configure what restrictions you want to apply, if any. So I think that covers all I wanted to show you. Let me see here. Activity, you will see the standard messages related to alerts, events, and tasks, and an audit trail of the activities. The same thing is in Azure. If you go to the CloudSimple portal, you go to activity, it shows you here the current alerts, events, and tasks, and audit. So if you pick an alert and you select the item, it gives you the details on the right-hand side here. If you have an issue, you can click on open a support ticket. For events, the same way. You select the event, you get the details here. And for tasks, it shows you all tasks and the current status. So I'll pause here and take any questions. Okay.
So باشمهندس مصطفى أنا عندي سؤال.
Yeah.
So as a CloudSimple, do we have any like integration between the native application, the native Azure application, and the VM created? So, for example, is if I need to deploy a SQL database on the VM which I created, so can I do that using a CloudSimple?
Okay, so if you want to deploy SQL, you can't deploy from Azure Marketplace. You need to deploy a virtual machine and install SQL in it. To deploy a virtual machine, you deploy it via the Azure portal as I showed you, but you select the deployment target would be the private cloud and the resource group and resource pool. After the VM is deployed and Windows is running, then you go in and install your SQL server. So you bring your license with you, and Microsoft Azure gives you a discounted licensing if you run SQL Server as well as the Windows Server license if you run it within the private cloud on Azure. So if you compare this to go into the marketplace and pick an appliance that's a SQL Server in it, that will have it pre-built in the server. In the private cloud, you don't have it pre-built unless you create a template with the application installed, but you do the customization script. It's like a sysprep equivalent to anonymize the virtual machine, the OS in a virtual machine before you deploy it, clone it to a template. From that point on, you can deploy other nodes, other SQL servers from within that same template, and then you customize it.
No, okay, it's clear now. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, so let me stop the recording if no other questions. And I thank you all and for your patience, and I'm sorry for the technical hiccup in the past hour or so.
Thank you, Mustafa.